Okay. Okay, let me practice. Hello, this is a Zoom breakdown. All right.
Hello.
How are you, Jack?
Good. Good to see you. How are things? It looks like you voted.
As a matter of fact, I did.
All right. Shocked. I'm absolutely shocked.
All right. We're all on board. Hey, Greg.
What's up?
All
Hey,
right.
Greg.
Hello. How's it going?
You're looking a little sideways.
How's this?
Is TV episodic Fargo Season 3, Episode 4, The Narrow Escape Problem. My background very quickly, I grew up in a town called North Lake, the furthest west suburb in Cook County. But most of my life grew up in Chicago. I like seeing my life as, especially in my childhood, grew as a residual benefit of the New Deal. In other words, we had an outstanding public school, high school I went to, good teachers, went on to do some Triton Junior College, wound up there back a couple times, went in the service, Navy, 4 years in the Navy. I was a parachute rigger, came out, wound up in the commodity futures industry for about 8-9 years, which gave me ironically, gave me an intro into the Players Workshop at Second City, which led to the Second City Conservatory, which led to me meeting Mr. Greg Bronis. I mean, Greg, I'm mixing the two.
That's okay. I'll go with Bronis.
Gregory Bradley.
Greg Bronis.
Theater in Chicago, which is how I wound up meeting Mr. Jack Bronis. Then I came out to Los Angeles, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the theaters in Chicago, Griffin Theater, the Zeitgeist Theater, where I met Jack, which then became Noble Full Theater. And Greg and I did many a breakdown of Goodfellas. We'd seen that movie over a zillion times. We cheated our ways in to see that movie.
Is that what we called it at the time? Breakdowns, right?
It was just us. We were broken. We were broke, and we were down.
And we were down. So you're right. That's a breakdown.
Anyways, I came out to LA. I'm here in LA. I've done series of theater, a lot of films. I did my own Papa Zeus, and a lot of independent projects. Something Ray, Fade Out Ray, with a gentleman by the name of Frankie Martinez. They have a small role in that. But there's another one that I've done most recently that's in post-production as we speak that Greg Bradley knows a little bit about, something called NOIR. So you're looking forward to that when it's done and out into the world. So that's enough of me. Gregory Bradley, like I said, I met him in the Second City. I believe he went to Columbia College for film and video. He's a Chicago lad. Grew up, I believe, on the south side of Chicago. I don't know what high school he went to. I do know
it doesn't matter.
He went to
Corliss High. Corliss High.
Corliss High. Yeah, that all sounds French.
Corliss High. I know, on the south side.
Again, we met at the Second City Training Center. He also did work at IO, the Improv Olympic, which I did too. But he was over there on a team for a while there, and then he came out west with his writing partner Lee Anthony Smith. There's a film called War. If you're ever browsing through Netflix, you'll find War with Jet Li and Jason Statham that Greg and Lee Anthony Smith wrote. And they also wrote and directed this film that I just talked about, Noir. Jack, he went to St. Ignatius. Is that right? Great high school?
That's correct, yeah.
St. Ignatius High School. Loyola University. Bilingual, I believe, Italian and Polish. Is there more than that?
And French.
And French. Oh no, with eventually you went to Europe and you spent about approximately a year or so?
That's right.
Yeah, and he was a journalist. I know he went to Second City Training Center, like, well, and now he wanted being a teacher there. He is a teacher there. If they ever gets up again where people walk into places, go to class, but I believe right now it's all through the internet like we're doing right now. And he's connected to Zeitgeist. We met through Flanagan's Wake. It was Zeitgeist when I met him, and then became Noble Full. He's also a teacher at the acting studio in Chicago. And now I'll just shut up. So I'll let.
That's a pretty close ballpark approximation. I don't know. It wasn't that far off. Yeah.
Well, what were you doing out in Europe? What was it? Was it just you went out on your own?
I was finishing college.
Finishing college.
Finished
Okay.
college in Rome. Loyola has a campus in Rome, so that's where I finished university.
Okay.
Cool. Now, how did you and Rick meet again?
Well, I had seen Rick in a play, John Guar's play, Moon Under Miami.
I think I remember that.
I don't know, a month or so later, this guy walks in and he's auditioning for Flanagan's Wake, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's Reggie Kayak from the show that I just saw.
There's actually a Fargo connection to Moon Under Miami. Who also in that play with me, in that play, I met Kate Walsh. Kate Walsh had a role in the season 1 of Fargo. She was,
wow.
Their famous line in that was, "I let you come inside me."
So Jack, what was your part in Flanagan's Wake?
I was the director and I conceived the show.
Yeah.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Rick, you know 2 people who have directed you both on stage and on film. This is interesting. I can see why.
That's true. He also directed the one-man show Paradox of Insanity, I Mean Humanity.
Oh, that's great.
that. And that's where I first met you, Greg.
Yeah,
you can't. That's right.
That was like a million years ago, man. Now it all
right.
That was at least 22, 20 years ago.
That was a while. That's a while. Okay, moving on.
It was a while ago.
I'm gonna try and narrowly escape this. It's the narrow escape problem. What's the title of the? All right, screw you guys.
Oh, okay. Right.
On to the narrow escape problem.
Mm-hmm. Were we supposed to watch this? I just thought.
I'm going to say this is probably my favorite season of Fargo's. Mm-hmm. And I know the allegory of Peter and the Wolf that this starts out with. I like that they assigned each character an instrument and an animal, a creature. And I'm going to start with the duck, our man Ray. Ray, of course, the first scene we've seen of him is he's going in to get his brother's stamp. He's going to go in to get it, the thing. I'm going to throw a question out to you guys. I'm going to stop right here and throw a question out to you guys. Do you remember, if you saw all the episodes, do you remember the very first words of the first line from Nikki, the girl Nikki Swango, in the series? The first line that she says in the series, because her first line was, "Go get him, tiger." She, of course, is the cat. He's the duck. And her enterprise, therefore, from there on out, really was trying to convince a duck that it's a tiger. So that's how he goes in, of course, to the bank. And again, to me, this is a credit to smaller roles. Both the guy who plays the bank manager and the girl, I think her name was Millie. Again, Nikki's one of Nikki's words message to him before he goes in was, remember, the richest guy in the room is always the boss. So, but it's hard for him to let go of the fact that he's a duck. When the guy turns him down, says he can't, it's against the rules to let him in to that box, the safety box or whatever that he's got. it's actually, I always vision it as there's an exchange between him and that girl, you know, where she's like kind of frightened. She's sitting there all meek. And I always just thought the only way to turn a duck into a tiger is if the duck is standing next to a mouse. And that's when he turns around and says, you know, pack up my accounts. I'm gonna leave it, you know, I'll go to a bank where that'll treat me right and blah, blah, blah. And that's when the guy comes back and says, you know, tells her to go. And then he really kind of overdoes it after that. He really starts telling him if he wanted to hear from an asshole, he'd ask his own. So far in this story-wise, you know, as a writer, what do you get from it? As you know, as a producer, or just as a audience member, what do you garnish from this so far in the opening or beyond?
You go for it.
I love the interconnectedness of it, and the fact that Billy Bob Thornton is the narrator. It was a big part of a previous season.
Right.
So it's just funny having him be the narrator, especially since in the previous season that he was in, he was such a nefarious character. He's
Right.
almost like the equivalent of the David Thewlis character in this season.
Yeah.
Right, the heavy, the bad guy.
Right.
So that was something. That was the first thing that struck me. I also felt like the grandfather, because I can't remember who the grandfather was supposed to be. I think
Sy.
the grandfather should have been actually the police officer that was taking Gloria's place or becoming her boss. You know?
Right.
He's the one that keeps cautioning her about, you know, that she, you know, has the wrong impulse. She's always fighting him. She's always against him.
I think I have a theory about that. That's a really good point, because I was thinking the same thing. Like, I wasn't actually thinking that should go to her boss, even though it makes sense. But I was thinking, why is Sy the grandfather? But then I started to think about his role in the story. And to Emmett, he does kind of dote on him, almost like a protector, like a grandfather type, because they're also dealing with the wolf that's taking over their company. So I think because we were going to focus on those characters,
Right.
Sy was going to, you know, act more like the grandfather. And I also think that it's kind of showing that the metaphor is more of that. It's a metaphor. I mean, it's not going to be identical to the exact story, but it's going to be very, very similar. And it's also going to be very foreboding and foreshadowing as well of what's to come. And first of all, it's really funny because having to revisit this episode, because you're right, Rick, I've seen season 1 and I have seen season 2. I mean, season 3. Right. But this particular episode was so funny because watching it, I love the way that they structured that opening with the story of Peter and the Wolf, and the way that they did assign those characters the instruments, and it was so fascinating that I had to look up Peter and the Wolf and kind of understand the story again. No, it's really actually the first time, and it just makes it so much better. It enriched that opening, the way that they use the instrumentals with the characters and who's who in that. So I just love that. I really because
throughout the episode, every time one of these characters came up, you know, their instrument came up with it. I liked when Officer Gloria Burgle was entering the police. Peter was entering. Nikki Swango was leaving, and they switched the instruments there. I just thought
it starts off with the strings, and then all of a sudden you see Nikki, and I think she has a particular, I forgot the horn that she has that represents the cat. That's like perfect. Ray going into the bank, and that whole sequence of him being a duck that's trying to be a tiger that you referred to. I thought what was really fascinating about that is how easy he related to Millie. Millie,
Yes,
first of all, the
yeah.
actress that played Millie was excellent.
Yes,
There's
yeah.
a moment where after she brings him the cream soda, and that other guy, the banker, was just like, "Oh, well, don't crowd the man. Don't back up." She literally backs up in
Backs
a very
up.
submissive sort of way.
Exactly. She does that thing.
And I did think that when he recognized her after he made a comment of, well, you know, we have to drill the box and that's going to be tough on us, but you know what? We give you a key, you come back a week later.
Yeah.
And I think once he identified her being scared of not just her boss, but of him,
Yeah.
reminded what Nikki said, that the richest guy is the boss.
Is
and
the
then
boss.
he became more of his brother
Yeah.
and just said, okay, well, just take all my money out. I thought that was a great scene there.
Yeah. Yeah. But also his perception of what, like, in other words, he got 10 grand. We could have gotten much more. She made the statement. She goes, "You got 10 grand." He goes,
Yeah.
Well, that's your criminal son.
because he's still Ray. And Ray has that, which is funny because she said, "You wait a minute, he's got more about millions, and out of that you got 10 grand."
10 grand.
But that's a part of the reason how she gets caught. Because I will say that was the one time I agreed with Ray, because I thought, no. Well, I think Ray was doing it because it's fair. It's fair. The stamp is worth 10 grand.
It's about the stamp.
Yeah, but I think if
Ray, after that, after he gets out of there, from there on out, Ray is quite honestly a duck the rest of the way through.
Which is interesting when you know that at the end of the Peter and the Wolf, that the wolf eats the duck.
Yeah.
Which is a great foreshadowing, because at the end of the episode, the wolf Varga is asking Emmett, "What about your brother?" You know.
Yeah.
So right at that moment, you already know he knows everything. I mean, we'll get there. But he also has his crosshairs not just on Ray, but also the girl, which I think they definitely underestimate in this one.
Ray had one moment. There was one exchange he had with Gloria, who came in to question him. That was sort of like there was just like a moment of simpatico-ness, just a very, very brief moment. And that's when he sees her singing and goes, "Oh, Chief." And she goes, "They're going to, something about soon to be."
They're changing, yeah,
and they're changing. He goes, "They always try to screw you, don't they?" And she goes, "They try."
They try. That was great. Well, which is really interesting because, this episode really kind of showing the idea that she's invisible. She doesn't really, nobody sees her, nobody hears her. And that she has problems using technology and stuff like that. I felt that one moment he said, "They really try to screw you," and then she literally looks at him and says, "They try." It's like that one moment she could be seen for that brief moment. But
so I think we also mentioned David Thewlis is just amazing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's so good. He's such a wolf.
He is.
Yes, he is.
I was gonna go. Well, let's go into him a little bit, because this wolf. Private equity companies coming in, destroying, basically bleeding a company, and then and it's legal. So, which is basically what he was doing in this thing. But the boldness, what they're doing, was that they just didn't, they're just doing what they want.
Because he knows he's going to get away with it.
Yeah, he knew he's going to get away with it, and that whole introduction thing where he's just, it's this is my capitalist critique, is this overconsumption, this just feeding himself and wasting, because then you go say vomits. That seemed to be a recurring habit that he does.
Which is interesting, because you didn't realize. I remember the first time I saw it, I wasn't really focusing too much on that, but the idea that he may be bulimic, but it kind of does, just as a backstory of character.
Yeah.
Of this is what this guy does. But I think you hit it really right on the head, that it really is a metaphor of these big guys, these companies that consume everything, only to spit it back out You couldn't have found a perfect way to describe that than this character to him. I mean, and you almost have to go the introduction to how every character is met, because if you're going back to the whole Peter and the Wolf and all of them being assigned instruments, you've got, I mean, first of all, the being Emmett being the bird, you know, and him with the ties and the shoes is so completely different from his brother who has to shave to look like him as a duck, and he looks just like a duck. And then you got Nikki as the cat, which is like perfect. But when you get to Varga, I mean, I got sick. I couldn't even really watch it again because when you see all that food that he has on that table and the way that he eats, and it was disgusting. You know, that was even before he puked it up. But right off the bat, it creates that opening, creates a fable, which I think is interesting because it always starts off based on a true story. Yeah. But they're really kind of telling you a fable, you know, with the introduction of these characters.
Right. And even that, you know, because that's pretty much in every episode, this is based on this is a true story.
Right.
What does that mean? You know, it doesn't actually mean that it actually happened. It just means a true story. The story itself is true. Maybe it's not historically true.
Right.
Absolutely. No, you're right, because they kind of changed
1 and 2. Even when they do it, but for sure they're doing it in this season 3. This is a true story, and true fades away before the rest of them do. So it says
the story is the last
thing, exactly.
And I do think it is the idea of playing around with true. And kind of a fictional story, that what's true and what's fictional. And I think the show does it really well because the way that they even open into Peter's character is you see the mouth of the wolf, you know, as it grows bigger, you kind of see her character coming in. They're already taking what could be a true story and really kind of embellishing it as, like I said, I feel like I was watching a fable, you know.
Right. Well,
and this episode could have been the first episode of the season.
Yes.
Without anything beforehand, you know, like you said, you knew what was happening just because of the Prokofiev reference.
They play in this particular season. They do play with the concept of truth versus fiction, creating truth. You know, that character Yuri has a little speech that he does where he talks about, in this country, there's 3 words for truth. There's man's truth, and then he says, then there's God's truth, pravda, and then there's non-pravda, or something like that.
Nepravda.
Nepravda. And then he says, that's the leader's truth. And he says, it's because, I paraphrase, but he says, it's because the leader knows what nobody else does, that the truth is whatever he says it is. And to me, that speaks perfectly to, you know, our world, really. Right.
And so man's truth, God's truth, and then the Russian term, which is kind of untruth, is what a leader does do, is it's telling you what he wants you to know. Because it's all about kind of stealing the narrative, you know, creating a narrative, and everybody has a truth. Everybody has, you know, if you look at perspective, and what I think is interesting about Ray's perspective is that he feels that, you know, my narrative is my brother's cut me out of my share of my inheritance, and I'm owed something, and even why he's with Nikki when he explains to his boss, you know, that she loves me.
I love that
look
scene.
At her. She's hot. Yes. And I love her. And
the other two both know better.
Yeah. They're both no. This ain't the way to go, Ray.
Yeah. But that's his truth. That's his, which is fascinating because you don't know at this particular episode how she really feels about him.
Yeah.
Does that equal?
I think forever. You never really know.
Yeah. Well, I think Going through the rest of the episodes, I actually do think she does have some love for him, just on the certain things she does further down. But
I also don't think he is her biggest priority.
No. I mean, that's evident.
Right.
Yeah, that's evident in this episode and the prior episodes leading up to this one.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm curious what you guys thought of the Winnie Lopez character, because I was trying to sort of, figure out what it is she represented, or like, is she? Who is Winnie Lopez?
I mean, in this episode, aside from being, bringing out,
she's also
connecting,
comic relief too.
Yeah, comic relief, but also connecting information to between her and Gloria by the end.
She reminds me of you, Rick.
She does?
I mean, right? Yes, she does. Because she meets her in the stall. And so you set up the sequence when Gloria is in the bathroom and nothing's working for her. She can't get the water fountain because it's a hand sensor thing. And they want to really get across that Gloria is invisible. Yeah, they really, and that technology and her don't go hand in hand, which is ironic because her playing Peter, Varga being the wolf is all about technology. Yeah. So then you hear her voice before you even see her because she's in the stall, and apparently menstruating, because that's another thing that happens in this, not in this episode, and a couple episodes earlier, what happened with Nikki and Emmett. But then when she comes out, man, she comes out like gangbuster. Yeah. And I first of all, I love her character, but I feel like she's that kind of character that fits into this type of world where you have your protagonist and you have your antagonist, but she's kind of like that common, almost the clay of the people, in the sense that she says exactly what's on her mind.
She talks about her sex life with her husband within a minute of meeting her.
Less than a minute with meeting her and stuff, like about having a baby, the idea, the reason I like there's a moment
their sex positions.
Yeah.
Well, there was a moment
where crammed up, toilet paper inside her.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments was in So Bizarre saying, well, he usually like to hit it from the back, but we're doing missionary because there's only one straight points. I mean, 2 points straight to the middle, kind of between. Yeah, it was just funny, but it right off the bat that showed me exactly who this character was. Yeah, and what was very clever about the episode is they could have just written her just in that one scene, right? And that just would have been okay. And the fact that she could use the faucet water and she can use the electricity, to me, it shows me that she's visible.
She's
Gloria's
substantial.
Yeah, if Gloria's invisible, she's visible, and as we discussed later on, she's kind of like Gloria, except she's much more forceful, and you could even you remember when Gloria walks out of the bathroom and she goes to the car and Winnie writes the note as if she knows, like she known Gloria all her life. Yeah. And so I love the idea of saying, she's also a good person, because the idea of saying that, look, hey, I saw your license plate and I didn't want to enter it into the lotto, and if I win, I'll split the winnings with you. And I'm just like, who does that? It was great. It's great. But I do, to answer your question, Jack, I think that she is a visible character that probably could draw attention to the case that Gloria is working with. Because if we go from this scene to the scene where she goes and meets with Sy, she was drawing a lot of attention with Yuri and what's the other guy's name?
Yuri, I forgot what the other names. Kamako, I don't know. I forget it. D'Amico.
The henchman. I mean, the moment Sy, and I love that scene when Sy's literally like, I didn't call her. I did not call her. Okay. Let's put it on.
Sy wanted to make sure does everybody hear me?
Yeah, exactly. And then what's also great is the moment he goes in the office, you got Yuri, who was at one point facing the cop, but then the moment she goes in the office, his chair suddenly turns and faces the office because of the glass office. But I'll say this too. But I think it was very important to make her very smart in the sense that it's so evident that something's going on.
Yeah,
was Sy the one driving the car? I can't remember.
Sy was the one who drive. Yeah. That was in the I think episode 2 when the duck came out and he's fired and he's got his backs and Sy's just in there doing that. Stupid.
Well, their character Sy is he's a fascinating character too because he wants to be Emmett's his work brother. You know, he really comes across like that. And you're right, that moment where after he's already informed Emmett that it was Ray that came to the bank, got the envelope or got the thing. It was his cremated dog. And how does Emmett not know that? But he thinks he sticks the stamp in there. But Sy is such an interesting character because in order to show him what he's done, that they know that it was him, that Emmett and Sy know it was Ray that did this. He stands right in front of his Humvee, and he just stands and points. He points, but yet he could have pointed while sitting and pointing out the window, but he still has to get in the car. He does this awkward thing. He opens the door, and then he points. He drives, and then you reveal that he booted Ray's car.
You think you know a guy.
Well, the fact that he's playing twins and then playing a twin playing his own twin.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
we as the audience can recognize that it's the twin playing the twin, whereas the townspeople don't recognize that it's.
Well, Chief, I don't know, Greg, if you remember this at all, because I remember when I was first watching this season, and I was watching the thing, and I think we talked on the phone or something like that, and you were asked, "What do you watch?" And I told you I was watching Fargo season 3, and he goes, and I was telling him, "Man, I really like it." He goes, "Yeah, I heard Ian McGregor's in there. It was pretty good." And I go, "Oh," I said, "He is," but the guy playing his brother, he's really fucking good too.
That guy's better than you.
I remember that.
Greg
just stopped. He goes, "Okay."
You're absolutely right, Rick. That other guy's better.
He is better. Interesting thing with Emmett though is he has a perception of what he thinks being rich is about, and what this particular episode really shows you. Varga gives him a lesson on what being rich and the difference between rich and wealth really means.
There's two things about that, because that's when Varga goes to his house, but the kind of like the breakdown of family, where business intrudes on the family life, and Varga comes over unannounced and does this, and they have that meeting that you talk about where he talks about wealth. And I couldn't help but think, I remember when he was saying that, there was Jack Welch, I think it was Jack Welch, and the guy who replaced him at GE had an airplane follow him. He had an airplane, and they landed, and he'd have that second plane to use. So I found it interesting that he had these concepts of wealth. Wealth is having a decoy, playing decoys of when you fly through blah, blah, blah. And also he talked in there, as in this thing, his thing was they just took on these massive loans and they leveraged out. And it was around that same time, I remember I saw this gentleman by the name William Black, who was the guy who cracked the savings and loan problem. But he said there's a 4-part recipe to accounting fraud. 1, massive growth, massive unprecedented growth immediately, or don't report losses on your accounting books. And in this thing, there's they have separate accounting books. Everything that he talked about, this guy was doing in there. But I just thought that that invasion of family was the first thing that struck to me. And the thing with Emmett was, despite all this, he still had this kind of like, something inside of him knows that this wasn't right, you know, this idea of complicity, and I guess I would throw this out: is he complicit or is he just compromised in this here, or is he both? You know, in other words, he likes the idea of wealth. He, you know, you could see that he really, you know, and he asked the question because he says we're no longer in the parking lot business, and he says, what business are we in? He goes, we're in the billionaire business. And
that scene,
kind of,
actually, that scene's one of my favorite scenes in the whole episode.
yeah.
Because first of all, when you're introduced to, when we see Varga going to the house, his music plays. So it's the big bad wolf coming to where Emmett, you're exactly where the bird is living. And then, which is great, the wolf going to the birdhouse. Emmett just wants to pay this guy off, and then he wants to have nothing to do with him. Yeah. So the moment that he opens the door and the guy knows that he mentions that they're having dinner, he pretty much barges his way in there. Yeah. And then when he makes a comment of saying, when Emmett says, I'm rich, then Vargas is like, no, you're not. They're eating in the kitchen. And Emmett's wife said, well, we could have eaten in the better, the nice table, and he talks about his past of being a nanny's son, and how much, 3 meals a day in the kitchen brings him closer to home. So he knows how to entertain a crowd and literally telling him that, we could talk business right here, right in front of your wife and everybody. And so, that whole sequence is showing dominance. And so when you get into the office after he pukes again, Varga's sitting in the chair in front of Emmett's desk, and then Emmett is standing there saying, you're not going to be a partner. You just flew in here. You're not going to be a partner. I'm going to call Sy. And I love this line that Varga says when he says, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was talking to the boss. And then that moment, I thought you were the boss. And the moment he puts down the phone, I said, this guy has him.
He owns
because
it, yeah.
What does he talk about? Yeah, he talks about class wealth and class struggles, the have-nots, and what would happen if they found out you had all their money. And if you look at the blocking, which I found fascinating, was him working his way from being in the chair all the way doing his kind of triad about class struggles and the haves and have-not. And as he starts to educate him on what the difference between being rich and being wealthy is you're invisible. And he goes through all that. He's now goes to the stamp and he tells them about the stamp. So really at that point, you're now seeing Emmett in the weakest position that he can be because he's away from his desk. Yeah, yeah. He's literally now this guy knows about the stamp. He knows about his brother. And he knows about the girl. And this is the hook. The hook is the moment he mentions that I gave you $25 million credit. You see it on Emmett's face. Yeah, yeah. Well, how'd you do that? And at that moment, he's sitting down in Emmett's chair. And now he's in the most powerful position. And from the moment he signed the contract, it was over. It was like the devil seducing his prey. And that's really what it was. It was a seduction.
I love that. That's exactly right. And so many of the scenes are about power and dominance, you know, and one person has power and the other one, and sometimes it switches, but most times it doesn't. And
in Emmett's world, it's like you're living in a mansion, and in this town, you're considered rich, but you're not even close to being rich because you're not a part of the 1%. What he's offering. It's saying, I can make you richer than you ever thought, but rich has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with wealth that allows yourself to be invisible. And that $25 million credit with the bill, I mean, he's pretty much selling out his brother and everything.
He did sell out his brother.
Yeah, where do I sign? Where did I sign?
With the line, he goes, finally when when Sy brought up his brother as a loser, he said, he's not a loser. He says that. But in this moment. Yeah.
But Emmett says that. Emmett says he's a loser.
He's a loser. Yeah. So what else can she be? Because he's.
So what else can she be? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's an interesting thing, too, about the invisibility thing that Varga's after when, of course, Gloria is invisible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And really, when you think about it, the story is about Peter and the wolf.
Yes.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it really is. I mean, the bird and the duck are kind of central to Peter getting the wolf, but both of them are operating under invisibility. So it
Right.
really is foreshadowing the fact, and again, it goes back to, and if you look at the fable, the story, the wolf gets the duck. So that means that if Ray is the duck, the last comment is, "What about your brother?" And also, I thought it was interesting writing, because he could have just said, "Look, I already know about you and your brother and the history with your brother and stuff." But Vargas goes through the history of brothers all the way from biblical times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'd think he would have just mentioned Cain and Abel, but he just kept going on and on. I was amazed
Leviticus.
at how he was. And, let me ask you guys a question, both of you guys. What do you think went through Vargas' mind when he mentions the woman? Because I thought it was interesting the way they ended. Because when Ray finally admits that his brother's a loser, and then Vargas says, "Well, what about the woman?" And he says, "Well, if he's a loser, what do you think that makes her?" And I thought it was interesting that it hit on Vargas before it ended the scene. And I was curious.
I think Vargas knows better.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Scene, because they do show flashbacks of Varga listening. And first of all, I don't know why I laughed when I saw the picture of Stalin in that truck, where he sleeps and he's recording. I just thought that was so funny.
I know.
But also, I think if he's been listening, he's listened to dialogue or conversation between not just Emmett, but also Ray and Nikki.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of worries him too, because he understands if he's listening, Nikki's the one pulling the strings.
Yeah.
So I think he might feel, kind of going back to what you said, Jack, I think he feels that she's a bigger problem than his brother.
I agree. Well, she's the cat.
She's a cat. She's a cat.
She's not a duck.
Right. And the cat gets away in the story. So the wolf doesn't get the cat.
Right.
I'm speculating now because I don't know that they know completely everything about Nikki.
Well,
I think he's aware I think he is aware that a duck is trying to be a tiger, is trying to what they say.
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be something going on there.
Well, he knows enough about her to bring her up.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I mean,
he knows. Right. Yeah.
And the way that he did it wasn't just like adding them both together. It says your brother is going to be a problem, and then after that, what about the girl?
Yeah. In the final scene, the closing tag on this episode, of course, we come back to our girl Gloria. Can't pass up where she's there with the guy who's going to be the new chief, and he's sitting there.
Let's talk about him.
How about the composition of the transfer of power, and she doesn't want to stop on this thing, and he goes, I'm not trying to start things, and he goes, I think you are.
Yeah.
Like his logic for why this randomness, he really just wants to close these cases, get them out of the way, done. But I love the always going back to, I had guys like you in Fallujah.
Yeah.
Well, his name is Mo. His first name is Mo. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Because he keeps dismissing her, with Gloria, she's constantly trying to tell him that I'm still working the case, and he's constantly trying to tell her there's really no case, and you're trying to put things together that's not together. But you're right. I love that moment where he says, I hope you know what you mean. He said, I'm not trying to cause problems, and he looks right at her. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. I know people like you. And he goes, but again, he goes back to the war, which I think was fascinating. He's telling a woman about the war and how his men, he tell them to zig and they zag. And I think he was trying to prove a point, but she counters because she said, and next thing you know, they're in a body bag and they're sending them back to home. And then she stops, she listens, says, well, I'm already home. So I'm going to just finish. I'm going to work on this for 2 more days and get the hell up out of it.
To close it up, I like how it did end. Basically, Minnie really paid off because she visits right there at the end. Winnie visits her at the end, and they put another piece of the puzzle comes together.
Well, first of all, I thought it was interesting because before we got to Winnie, we got more narration.
Yeah.
And before we got to Gloria's house, and the narration was just saying how grandfather was disapproving of Peter being out in the woods.
Right.
And I will go back that I think in that case you could go kind of like what you said, Jack, that in this case grandfather now would represent Mo, her boss, of saying that she would, we don't approve of you going out in the woods and there's wolves and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting. And then the moment that you see a moment with her, the moment you see a moment with her and her son, and then Winnie shows up. Talk about, you meet somebody in one day and already they show up at your house. But one of my favorite moments is that when she comes in and Winnie's just like, oh, geez, you look like you were about ready to hit the sack. And then Gloria says, it's okay. Boy, when she just walks right in there. She, even before she says, do you want a cup of coffee or tea? She's already in there because this character has something on her mind. And she says, I want to talk about it. And she's a wonderful character.
Yeah.
But yes, once they start to talk about her case and Gloria's case, then you start to connect the dots. There's a lot of Stussies.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too that when she knocks on the door, Gloria looks out the window and like gives a ugh.
Yeah. Would you? I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I want to answer the door.
Where's home?
Let me ask you, Rick, out of being your first your first episode on breakdowns of stories, and you went to Fargo, what made you decide to go with this one? Episode
4?
Yeah. Out of any other episodes, you went with this one for the first one. Why?
Basically, I talk of the intrusion of business into family. Really rang a bell because the whole thing of him coming into Varga, breaking into their house, basically invading their house.
Right.
As you said, he has a way of just communicating himself, just the same way he invaded their business. And now he's going into their house, and basically he just knows how to appeal to people's basically their greed. And I do like to compare that to the world in which we live, in which I think family really has been. I don't know. There's this concept of what success is. I grew up with it. There's things I wanted. I went into the commodity futures industry. I had that thing in me. I was hungry to try and, I wanted to make money. Before long, quite honestly, you realize the reality is that's all you're really doing is you're just going after money. It's not really, everybody has abilities and blah, blah, blah. Well, what are you using it for? What are you using your talent, your abilities for? You could work 12, 14 hours a day in something. And at the end of the day, what was it for? And I just think of that permeates our society, that we get these jobs. I empathize with Emmit in this sense, and that I think for as rich as he is, he's richer than us or me or you or whatever, but by what he's doing. But he's kind of trapped in this thing, and now he's really trapped. Now he's really fucked.
Well, also,
what appealed to me about it.
If you also think about it, it's also how much money are you worth to give up your control? Because to have somebody like Vargas come into your company and basically take it over. And the thing is, the episode doesn't tell you what he's doing. As a matter of fact, I would have to go back over the episodes to find out really what they were doing. But it didn't matter, because I think the point is that Emmett had no power. Yeah. He thought he did, and maybe he started out. But the moment he borrowed money from these guys, he was already kind of in a hole. Just the idea that he wanted to pay it back. And I love that moment that Vargas tells him. He says, can I just pay you back? He says, nah, you're already in the pan. Yeah. And once you're in the pan, where else you're going.
Next is
the series seems like it's about consequences.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You make a choice, you got consequences.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's repercussions to those consequences,
Every
those
season.
choices.
Every season.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I agree.
Yeah, it does such a great job. Now, what do you think the name means? You know, the narrow escape problem.
The problem with
Well, I
narrow
tried
escape.
looking it up. I mean, I didn't understand the science of it, you know, but it has to do with the atom being able to escape. Like, but as time goes on, the window gets smaller and smaller.
Right.
Right.
So it's kind of, you know, applicable to this. I didn't, like I said, I didn't understand what the science was about.
Or, you know, well, I did.
Well, the last I'll touch on it is I thought it was an excellent episode. I thought what makes Fargo really fascinating and kind of like its predecessor, the movie, is that they can tell you a story in the Midwest, which is usually can be the most boring, bland place.
Yeah.
And yet they create these characters.
Yeah.
What's that?
Flyover country.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is really the place where you're stopping off to get to someplace better. Rick is starring in a film that I'm fortunate to be producing and directing called NOIR, and that is in post-production. So that should be out very soon, 2021. So if you're interested, follow us on NOIR the Film on our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And also, I have a movie documentary coming out on Amazon Prime the first or second week of November called Tough Ain't Enough, a conversation with Albert S. Ruddy. He's a producer of The Godfather and $1 Million Babies and the creator of Hogan's Heroes and all sorts of other things. A wonderful conversation with him. So if anybody's interested, be on the lookout on Amazon Prime. But if you're following us, you can follow me at Gregory J Bradley on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And you can follow Noir the Film on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And thank you for having me, Rick. This was fun.
You're quite welcome. And it'll never happen again. Thank you for watching. This is a Zoom breakdown. Running title, let me know what you think. This story discussion breakdown of Fargo Season 3, Episode 4, The Narrow Escape Problem. If you liked it, click like and subscribe to this channel, Rickaroo702. If you didn't like, click didn't like. In either case, you're welcome to leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Links are below for Greg and Jack, so you can follow them and interact more direct. Also links for Noir the Film. Also links below for relevant media that I support and would like to share with you. I leave you with these final words. We must fight, we must fight, we must fight. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Thanks again for watching. Stay safe. Hope to see you again soon. Rickaroo 702.